helmet. It's not glossy, it's matte or satin kind of, and it, so you don't get the shine. It's kind of a dull, there is a shine, but it's not shiny shiny. It's kind of a very dull sheen where it changes direction where the light hits. Fox Classics. Oh, there you are. I don't get Fox. I've got Amazon, I've got Netflix, Disney Plus. Nice cup of coffee. So I can kind of sketch this in pen and ink. So like sketch it like a thing here, but I've got to make it darker. And the shape has to look right. And if I get it wrong, it's going to look bad. So let's have a look and see what that angle was. It's kind of a weird sort of battered, kind of an odd shape. Of course, all the sugar's in the bottom of that. All right. That was a 0.1. So I can go over this slightly, create like a dull effect, but doing this very sketchy because I don't want actual really solid lines, because like I said, it's not like doing the skin here where you can actually do definite lines. With this is a very subtle, kind of a very subtle thing. So I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do this, but let's try it. There is shading there. Tricky, really tricky. And at some point I have to like change direction because the helmet does. And if I just do it all in this direction, the helmet's going to look weird. So at some point I have to kind of somehow change the direction of it, or I have to cross hatch in the opposite direction, like what I'm doing now, and hope that my pen doesn't give up the ghost, because it's been used to colour in effectively. There's a bit of a ridge here. This is why pen and ink is so tricky, because you can do the sketchy kind of effect, but if you make a mistake, it's really hard to correct. So yes, quite tricky. Here's, so this is very dark on this side, but it's also in this direction as well as this direction. It gets difficult because you're right-handed. I can do it this way, no problems. As soon as I have to go back in that direction, I hit problems. So I'm going to turn this upside down because it's easier for me. because it's not natural for me to go in the opposite direction. But I'm conscious of all right, so I have the IQ4 with Netflix, Amazon, and Disney Plus built in with the box. Comes in very handy, plus the on-demand stuff. Yeah, the only thing I can't get is Fox, because I don't have Fox TV and I don't have Foxtel installed. So, yeah, that makes it quite tricky. A lot of the shows I like, I want to watch it are on Fox, like this one. So, yeah. I bought, I wanted to see a show and I actually bought the DVD. So I can just buy the DVDs because it's what you do when you haven't got Foxtel. Now, because I'm using this very scratchy technique, the lines are very sketchy. So it's not a bad technique, but you have to be very careful how you control it. And I'm always doing it lightly, and I'm using a 0.1 because anything darker will spoil the cross-hatching effect. And the helmet is dark, but I'm having to build it up. Better if I build it up this way. It's going to be a light patch. This is in this direction, so the only time I don't actually stick with one direction only, because I can't, because for something like this, you've got to get the cross-hatching happening in the direction of the helmet this way, and also the direction of the helmet sort of curving around that way, which is why I'm going, I'll zoom in so you can see. So you can see the detail. So as you can see here on the helmet, the cross-hatching, be right back. Okay, I'll see you soon, Rachel. The cross-hatching goes in this direction, it goes in straight. It also comes back in this direction, and it also goes across this way. That's the only way that I can do it to build up this this effect. And it's very light, so I can go over it. And if I can go, can go over it. I can also make it darker where it needs to be. And then that's also and then in here. So I'll zoom out again. So you can see what I'm doing here is I'm basically coloring in with my ink pen, and being very, very careful to just double check that I'm kind of going in the direction of the helmet. This bit's going to be tricky. So I cross hatch with this sort of thing. I have to cross hatch in all directions, otherwise I get in trouble. it doesn't work. So I'm colouring in, but I'm colouring in with a pen. And I also will go across this way. Turn it upside down, do this side. Ah, right. It's very warm in here. So yeah, that's and then I can just darken the areas that where it changes direction, because there's no solid line. I have to put cross hatching in, shading, effectively shade the cross hatching, and parts of this are straight, so there are elements. And of course, when the watercolor goes over the top, it's just going to be smooth and it's going to actually look molded and it will look correct. This is a lot more tricky. This is the hardest part, building up the, you know, the kind of the shading in here, because it does go dark in here. There is actually a darker area. Which I'm trying to do now. Still using the 0.1, which is a very fine pen. I'm trying not to make any very solid straight lines, because if I go in the wrong direction and I end up doing the shading wrong, I'll end up undoing all the good work I've done so far. So I'm trying not to go over the same areas, except for where it's darker. And that's tricky. Now all this area in here is actually quite dark in here. And I can use a thicker pen, like a 0.3, which I may do. The trouble is the lines will get darker, and I don't really want the lines darker at this point. Because that will change the feel of it. All right. It's getting late. Not too many people online at the moment, so I don't know how much longer I'll stream. Probably stream until you know, I've kind of finished the helmet, because that is my main thing at the moment, and after which I will probably finish up. Because I'll be scanning this. And then after that, yeah, I will be watercolouring. All right. Let's see. Pen and ink, lots of fun. But I could have just as easily used Indian ink, because Indian ink, to put which I might still do, I might use an ink wash to give this a bit more tonal variation before I drop the colour on, because I'll do that. I'll go, this isn't quite, I don't want to build it up anymore, so I might add, a tonal wash over the top. That's actually not too bad. This is kind of what I want to do. In here, it's sort of more of a sort of did this. It's just, I have to get another number 1, I think, because this pen will wear out before I have a chance to, do any more illustrations. I like to make sure I have a pen, make sure my pens last longer than one illustration. That's actually not looking too bad. But like I said, that was a 0.1. If I get a 0.3, that one, 0.3, nope, I wonder where it went. No, that's a 5. There we go. So, just a bit concerned, like, there is actually a darker area in here. There is actually a line across here too, so it's not like round that way, it's kind of flattish. So using a slightly darker, but again, I don't want to stuff it up, but I do know that this in here it's got darker. To what degree, I don't know, but what I might do is and that goes darker. What I am going to do now, I'm going to zoom out for a moment. And I'm going to, texture on the helmet looks good. Thank you. The texture on the helmet does look good, and I'm going to actually get some ink wash over the top of that, because I don't actually want the texture to be the thing that kind of like, it needs to be kind of smooth. It can't be rough. So that's only just to give it a bit of a, shading, and now I want to make it, put some ink wash, but grey wash over it as an under shading for when I put my watercolor over the top. So it will still be black and white, but it'll be actually grayscale, and it will be, I do like the shading because it's kind of got that subtle sheen to it, but I think I need to put a bit of wash over the top to kind of like, same within here. I will put color over the top, but I also need to create a, let's see, don't have much water in here, but it should be enough. I'm not going to use a black and white, I mean a black paint. I will use a black ink, Indian ink. Just get that there. I'm using, oh, there we are. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm using a, going to get a paintbrush and some water and some of this, which is my Indian ink. And I'm going to just very subtly put a sort of a, find my paintbrushes. Just a smidge of, yep, I'll use a little bit. I want to create, like, put some shading, not in his face so much, but I do want to put some in the helmet, like I did with Batman, because I don't want to spend a lot of time putting the texture in with line. It works well, but I feel it needs to have a bit of, like, I don't know if it'll work. I hope it does, but there's areas that got to be a lot darker. And I need to give it more of a 3D effect. So, and I can't overwork it with the pen and ink because then it'll look like, it won't look right. So what I do need to do is get a little bit of this, shake it up, this Indian ink, and dilute it right down, and hope that, pray and hope that that works. So this is the last part of my, and I will need to dilute it a fair amount. Let's see if I've got some paper I can just, yep. So not sure this is going to work, but so there is a very dark area in there, and the whole thing here needs to be darker. And this paper here, it needs quickly, while it's, before it, you know, ends up being too, what ends up drying is, it needs some depth in here and in here. It's a bit like I do with watercolor, but it actually needs to be smooth, which is why I needed to use this, do this style. And it's actually a lot darker in here, and it goes around, actually needs to be much darker in there. So it needs this. And like I said, normally I wouldn't bother, but I do need to make this much, much darker, especially in here. Especially in here. Should put that back in when I'm done. I will paint over that bird. There's actually a highlight. So there is method to my madness, and there is a reason I'm doing this. It is necessary. You might not think so, but it is. And I'm looking at it going, it needs that. And like I said, normally I don't, but sometimes I need to add the extra shading when I don't want to work my pen and ink too violently. So that's why I'm doing it this way. It's not the watercolor part, it's the bit that is like an underpainting to the watercolor part, which allows the watercolor to then go over the top. And yeah. As you can see, the helmet is now more rounded. It's got more three-dimensional effect. That gives it a kind of a, I'll put some of the details back in white. This area in here will be painted in. And it saves on my pens. It saves on my pens, and it saves me from when I do large areas of just solid black. I don't want them in watercolor because I want to be able to put a color over the top. I will actually use the Indian ink as an underpainting. So when I put my color over the top, this will just be grayscale, and whatever color I put over the top it'll actually make it more three-dimensional instead of me having to create the effect with ink. I mean with watercolor, the colors that I choose. So there is a reason, because if I try and get this make it look like this with the watercolor, it will end up looking odd. So if I do it in the grayscale now, when I put the color over the top, it'll work. It'll just kind of go, oh, that's the shadow underneath. So yeah, that's the main reason. Gives you more of an idea of what's going on. So there's actually a area in here which is quite dark. Oops. Quite dark. So it's basically like using a big fat pen, a big fat ink pen. And instead of, you know, blocking it in my pens, I block it in this. So the shadow is always there, and it doesn't, you don't have to create it with. There you go. So there's still the texture underneath, and there's still the pen and ink, but the actual main dark parts, see, I don't have to do too much more to this. I can put a bit of more shading under here, which I shall. Actually quite dark, and more shading under here. And what'll happen is when I put the watercolor over the top, the dark shadows will show up and will kind of work in its favor. It's more subtle. I do like working with ink wash. So it gives it more of a, the helmet looks more accurate. And I did this with Batman because we have a large expanse of black, and you don't want to be cross-hatching the illustration. Even comic book artists will go, there's a big area of shadow, and then they just block it in with black ink. Like there's no subtleties, there's no little, they don't spend all their time using pens and cross-hatching to get that. They just go, right, this area is black, this whole area is black, I'm going to make it black. And that's what they do. So, and this will dry lighter because it always dries lighter, the ink wash, because I've added water to it. So Indian ink is very dark, and once it dries waterproof. So if I have large areas of shadow that I need to put in, then I use the Indian ink. And that's kind of what I'm doing here, because I don't want to spend all my time, like I said, putting in, different tonal variations with my pens and things like that. So I'll put them in now. And there are there's subtle shades in here, which I can put in with pen and ink, with watercolor when I get around to it. But the majority of these tonal, gives that tonal with highlights and stuff, works better than if I just cross hatch it. That's the main reason for it. And if I zoom in, you'll see that there's still texture on the helmet, but now the helmet looks more solid. It's not, it kind of looks like a helmet, which is the idea behind it. So that's the main reason I do that. And I only do it sometimes where I feel that it needs a little bit of extra shadow in areas. So I won't be too much longer, actually. I think I've pretty much almost finished where I want to be today. And then the rest of it gets done on Thursday. If I do it Thursday, if I stream Thursday, I haven't decided yet whether I'm going to stream Thursday. It all depends on what I do with my cat. So I'm going to add a bit of dark shadow in here. And it's quite a dark area in here. Don't know what's happened here. Sometimes I'll add, the extra shadows if I think it needs them. I think it's actually not too bad in here. And when areas are dark, like in certain places, I will sometimes add the extra shading with the grayscale, but this is not a ink wash picture. This is a pen and ink picture, pen and ink illustration. So I'm not going to go too overboard. I do want to put some black in here because I don't know what's happening in here. It's sort of like a, it has buttons or something. Not sure. Just to give it a bit of context. And in here, I might as well, just because I can. Okay. So that line will stay there. It'll be permanent instead of me colouring it in pen and ink. That's just going to be subtle. That. And yeah, I like that. The rest of this is going to be done in colour. So so all this shading on the face will be shaded in. The shine on the helmet looks really good too. Thank you. This is why I wanted to do it this way with the ink wash, because I couldn't have got that shine looking correct, like the sort of a, you know, like a dull matte burnished kind of like a dull helmet made out of metal. The color I'll end up doing is this one here. I'll show you. This here, this blue gray color, is pretty much the color that our helmet is going to be, because that is actually the helmet color. This is a Payne's gray, so that is that blue gray anyway, and that's the color that helmet's going to be. His eyes are also about that color, and the jacket that he's wearing, this jumper thing, coat thing, is also the same color. So there's actually a lot of a lot of color in that. Lot of color. I'm going to sign it because I've done what I can with the pen and ink so far, and I think what I might do is I might sign it down here on his jacket, because it's a good spot for it. And why not? There you go. So I've got his signature down there, my little signature on his collar, and I usually put a little initial somewhere as well. So if someone for some reason manages to white out, steal my picture and white out my signature, I will always know which signature, which picture is mine, because I'll always hide an initial somewhere in the pen and ink work. I'm not going to do it now because I don't want anybody who watches, who, you know, anyone watching the video later who might go, oh, I'm good, I can remove it there too. So I usually hide it in there, and then I will, yeah, I'll do a scan of the picture, and then I'll, yeah, and then I'll get to the coloured part. Now I'm wondering if I should start the coloured part tonight. I could. I mean, it's only 7 o'clock, which is not a bad time. So maybe I'll do a couple more hours of streaming and then quit. I'm just going to move my keyboard, because what I will do is I could most likely put a be right back. And I've only got 2 people watching, but that's cool. That's all right. What I could do is really great work so far. Thank you, Rachel. I will actually continue. If you feel the art in you, sure, why not? No, I think I can go for a couple more hours, and usually I do on a Sunday, because and I'm not working tomorrow, so it's a good opportunity for me to, because I've been streaming now for almost 4 hours, and I could be doing the painting on this. It would be easy enough, but I haven't got it set up for painting at the moment. So what I need to do is I'll need to scan down there. I'll need to scan this, and I might do a be right back, scan my picture, get some water, get my paints all set up, and then come back and paint it, start painting it, which will be exciting, and not actually log off, not actually end my stream, but just temporarily put it on hold while I do all that. Just close out of my my ink stuff away so I can get my paint stuff out. So yeah, I might be about maybe about 10 minutes, not even 10 minutes, probably not even that. I need to scan the picture. I need to, I want to scan the picture, and then I want to get all my art supplies ready. Shouldn't take long, just need to get some water, do all that. Probably about 5 minutes or so. And then I shall be back for the next part, the next thrilling installment, which is the colour on my picture of Sergeant Schultz. So please stay with me. I don't go away, and I hopefully will be back as soon as possible, and I'll catch you then. So I'm not leaving, as I said, I'm not ending my stream. I'm just going to get some stuff ready so I can paint the coloured part of this. So I hope you can join me in a few moments and hang around and talk amongst yourselves. I won't be too long, hopefully. I'll see you when I get back. Thanks. Hello again. Thank you for joining me. I'm back. So I've scanned my picture. I'll just move some stuff out the way. Obviously my camera has shifted, so I'll just adjust that. Give me a moment. No, it's not going to stay where I put it, which is very annoying. Come on. Got it on a weird little hook thing. So doesn't want to stay where I put it. Excuse me a moment. I'll see if I can get it to don't. Thank you. All right. So I have scanned my picture and I'm back. So this is, I'm going to get a drink of water because my throat is dry. Right. So my pen and ink line work of Sergeant Schultz is done. I'll zoom in on the details on the helmet so you can actually see what I've done. I will. See, as you can see, I've done the cross-hatching in pen and ink. So there is a lot of texture. I put all the texture in pen and ink. And then what I've done is I've gotten a Indian ink and I've done a wash, and I've actually put the wash over the top of the helmet just to give it that three-dimensional and just to give it that extra depth that I couldn't do by just sketching with pen and ink line, because I don't want the line, I want it to kind of look more solid. So that's just to show that there's an under structure, I guess, of pen and ink lines which go in different directions, so cross-hatching and things like that, just to start it off, because it needs something. Because if you just have it white, then you can paint it in, but it doesn't give you the same sort of effect. And the rest of it is illustrative, so the helmet has to be illustrative too. Now, I don't like to do just the pen and ink. It has no substance. So what I've done is I've done the pen and ink on the face, and I've followed through with the pen and ink wash on the helmet and across here. Now this creates like an underpainting, a base for my watercolors, which I'm about to do. And I will actually put my watercolor over the top of this. So this is what I'm going to be doing for another couple of hours, I hope. I'm putting the colors on. So I've scanned it, and the next part I always do, which is to start with my watercolor. Now, for those of you who have watched me several times, you will know what my technique is regarding this, and you probably become quite an expert on being able to tell what I'm going to do next. Anyway, however, for those of you who haven't, I will run through it again. My process, as I'm going through my process, just make sure I've got all the colors I need. So things are falling over, which is not good. All right, so basically I use 3 primary colors. So we've got a yellow, a blue, and a red. But the primary colors I use aren't your standard typical red, blue, and yellow. It's not the color I want. I want rose. Red rose. Nope, that's not it either. Here we are. So what I do use is I use slight variations in those colors. And if I can find my blue, I'll be very happy. There we are. That's what I want. I need to get a large one of that. Okay, so the 3 colors I use are, the hands are deep yellow for the yellow. Now that's kind of more of an orangey color, so it makes a really good starting base for a skin tone. The red is a deep red rose, which is kind of more of a pinkish color. Again, really good for a skin tone. Probably not that good for starting off, like if you were going to do something quite set and not necessarily skin tones, you would get an actual yellow. You would get a nice medium yellow, you'd get a cobalt blue, and possibly a permanent red or something like that. But for the purposes of this, I choose an orangey yellow, a pinkishy red, and a turquoise blue for the shadows. And that creates a different sort of thing. So I've got my 3 colors here. And the colors that I do use are my favorite brand, the only brand I use for my portraits. I have previously used other brands, and I still occasionally do, especially when I'm traveling. But for the most part, I use these because I love it. I love them. I'm not sponsored by them. I'm not endorsed by them. I'm not a large enough streamer to have them want to. Sadly, I have approached them, but I didn't even get a response. So, but I shall continue to expound on these because I really like them and I really believe in the product. So I'm going to keep saying what I use, because I've had people ask me, what do you use? So there you are. Now, I don't use pans. I don't use tubes. I use a liquid watercolor. And by now, everybody probably knows what a liquid watercolor is. You think, oh, watercolor is liquid. That's only after you mix it. But this one here, this brand is Dr. P.H. Martin's Hydrus Fine Art Watercolor. And these are liquid. So they're a pigment-based watercolor paint. They're not a dye. They're actually pigments. So just like in your palettes and your tubes and things like that, these are pigments. The difference is that the pigment paint is actually mixed with like a distilled water or something like that in a solution, pre-mixed, so that you've already got this vibrant, concentrated color straight out of the bottle. So all you have to do is, it's got an eyedropper, and you just use 1 drop in a palette, and for 1 drop of the color in a palette, I can do a whole painting. So they're really economical, and not only are they great, they also stay vibrant. They retain their vibrancy even when you dilute them right down, which is why I love them so much and why they're ideal for what I do, because my style is to create layers. So I do a lot of layering, or glazing as it's known, and I very, very rarely use them directly out of the bottle. If I want a really vibrant color neat, then I will use it. I won't dilute them. So in that respect, they're just absolutely brilliant. If I want to put watercolor on, like for the skin tones, I dilute them right down, and then I just layer the colors. And by layering I tend not to mix a skin tone. I'll put an orange and then I'll do a pink. When you'll see me at work doing that. So I always shake them because they are pigments, so they will settle in the bottle. And once you've had them sitting for a while, they do tend to do that. I don't use pans or anything like that, because, oh, thank you, Chair Bear. What a lovely love heart. I don't use the pans because I can't get it thin enough with the same level of pigmentation without creating like a granulated effect, water effect, which is not what I want and doesn't work for what I do. So I'll use a drop of, just a single drop, and I'm using Hansa Deep Yellow, as I said. Now, I have several paintbrushes and I have some favorites. I tend to use a flat brush to get, the overall color in, just a general overall color. And then I use the thinner brushes for various things, and I alternate my brushes. Sometimes I have a couple of favorite brushes. Sometimes I use them, and then when I feel like it, I'll just grab a different brush. I have so many, but I do have my favorite. I can't find my favorite one at the moment. Oh, here it is. This one's my favorite one. And I like these ones. These ones are Monte Martre, which is just a student quality one, and they've got colored handles, and I like them because the handles are short. I don't like great big long handles because I work really close and they just get in the way. So I have these ones, and this one's cheap, but it's got a nice point on it, and I just really like it. So anyway, I'll dilute this now. Sergeant Schultz is more pink than orange, but I always start with an orange. So, and I'll go over it with more of a pink color, but I'm diluting this right down, and I always have a piece of paper next to me so I can test the color. And generally I just use the 3 colors to begin with. This is going to require quite a diluted orange. It's actually quite bright at the moment. I'm not able to dilute it much. I'll use it, and it will, what it will do is it actually will dry lighter. So at the moment I will use this, and I tend to just paint over the eyes as well, because the pupil or the whites of the eyes are never actually white. The see-through handle is nice. It is lovely, isn't it? I do like the see-through